At the center of this dark tale were three individuals whose lives had become inextricably intertwined. Ezra Blackwood, a distinguished widower and successful entrepreneur, his son Liam Blackwood, a man struggling with the shadows of his father's success, and Melody Sinclair, a captivating woman whose ambitious nature concealed a troubled past. Little did the residents of Oakwood Heights know that beneath this facade of normalcy, a storm was brewing, one that would unleash a torrent of passion, betrayal, and ultimately tragedy. Ezra Blackwood had always been a force to be reckoned with. Born into a middle-class family in 1955, he clawed his way to the top through sheer determination and an uncanny ability to spot opportunities where others saw only obstacles. By his early 30s, Ezra had founded Blackwood Innovations, a tech company that would eventually become a Fortune 500 giant. However, his professional success came at a cost. Ezra's unwavering dedication to his career had strained his relationship with his wife, Evelyn, and their only son, Liam. It wasn't until Evelyn's untimely death from cancer in 2010 that Ezra realized the true extent of what he had sacrificed in pursuit of his ambitions, racked with guilt and grief. Ezra tried to rebuild his relationship with Liam in the years that followed. He showered his son with financial support and business connections, desperately trying to make up for lost time. But the emotional distance that had formed over decades of neglect proved difficult to bridge. As he entered his 60s, Ezra found himself grappling with a profound sense of loneliness. Despite his wealth and status, he longed for the warmth of genuine human connection. It was this vulnerability, carefully hidden beneath his polished exterior, that would ultimately lead him down a path of no return. Growing up in the shadow of Ezra Blackwood was no easy feat. Liam had spent much of his life trying to carve out an identity separate from his father's overwhelming success. Despite having access to the best education money could buy, Liam struggled to find his footing in the professional world. He had dabbled in various ventures. A failed restaurant, a brief tech startup, and most recently, a moderately successful online marketing agency. But nothing seemed to measure up to the towering legacy of Blackwood Innovations. Liam's insecurities, fueled by years of perceived inadequacy, manifested in bouts of depression and a nagging imposter syndrome that colored all his interactions. It wasn't until he met Melody Sinclair at a local coffee shop in 2021 that Liam felt a glimmer of hope. Her vivacity and unwavering belief in his potential breathed new life into his world. For the first time in years, Liam dared to imagine a future unburdened by the weight of his father's expectations. As their relationship blossomed, Liam opened up to Melody about his complicated relationship with Ezra. He shared his frustrations, fears, and his desperate desire for his father's genuine approval. Little did he know that in confiding in Melody, he was setting the stage for a betrayal that would shake the very foundations of his world. Behind Melody, Sinclair's dazzling smile and quick wit lay a past marred by hardship and resilience. Born to a teenage mother and an absent father in a small town in rural Pennsylvania, Melody learned early on that survival meant adapting to whatever life threw her way. Her childhood was a patchwork of temporary homes and fleeting friendships as her mother moved from one relationship to another. Despite the instability, Melody excelled academically, viewing education as her ticket to a better life. She worked tirelessly, earning scholarships that allowed her to escape her hometown and attend college in Boston. It was during her university years that Melody's ambitious nature truly came to the fore. She juggled multiple part-time jobs while maintaining top grades, driven by an insatiable hunger for success and stability. After graduation, she landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm, quickly climbing the ranks with her sharp mind and charismatic personality. When she met Liam Blackwood, Melody saw in him not just a potential partner, but also a gateway to the world of wealth and influence she had always craved. Although genuinely drawn to Liam's kindness and vulnerability, part of her couldn't help but be enticed by the Blackwood name and all it represented. As she became more entangled in the Blackwood family dynamic, Melody found herself faced with choices that would test her loyalty, ambition, and ultimately her humanity. The seeds of the fateful affair were sown on a crisp autumn evening at the annual Blackwood Innovations Charity Gala. Melody, resplendent in a form-fitting emerald gown, accompanied Liam to the event, her first time rubbing shoulders with society's upper echelon. While Liam nervously mingled with potential investors, Melody found herself drawn into a conversation with Ezra Blackwood. Ezra, his hair immaculately styled and his tuxedo perfectly tailored, exuded a magnetism that Melody found impossible to resist. They talked about art, literature, and travel. topics that, despite Liam's kindness, barely interested him. As the evening wore on, Melody couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between father and son. While Liam was hesitant and modest, Ezra was confident and commanding. In the weeks that followed, Melody found herself thinking of Ezra more and more. She rationalized her thoughts as mere curiosity about her boyfriend's father, but deep down she knew there was something more brewing beneath the surface. The turning point came during a family dinner at the Blackwood mansion. Liam had excused himself to take an important business call, leaving Melody and Ezra alone in the study. As they stood before a magnificent painting, a wedding gift to Ezra and his late wife, their hands brushed accidentally. The jolt of electricity that passed between them was undeniable. Ezra's voice was soft, barely more than a whisper, as he confessed how alive he felt. Something he hadn't experienced in years. Melody, her heart pounding, admitted she felt the same. In that fleeting moment, an invisible line was crossed between them, one that could never be undone. What began as stolen glances and lingering touches soon escalated into clandestine meetings and passionate encounters. They would rendezvous at out-of-the-way cafes, secluded parks, and eventually, in the very home Ezra shared with his son when Liam was away on business trips. Ezra, for his part, was torn between exhilaration and guilt. He knew the magnitude of his betrayal, not just to Liam, but to the memory of his late wife. Yet the vitality Melody brought to his life was intoxicating. For the first time in years, he felt seen not as a successful businessman or a grieving widower, but simply as a man. Melody, too, grappled with conflicting emotions. She cared for Liam and was grateful for the stability and affection he offered. But Ezra awakened something in her, a passion and ambition that both thrilled and terrified her. With Ezra, she could envision the life she had always dreamed of, one filled with luxury, intellectual stimulation, and power. As the affair deepened, both Ezra and Melody became increasingly adept at leading double lives. They mastered the art of deception, crafting elaborate alibis and maintaining a facade of normalcy in Liam's presence. But with each lie, the weight of their secret grew heavier, threatening to crush them under its burden. Little did they know that their carefully constructed house of cards was about to come tumbling down, with devastating consequences for all involved. The first signs that something was amiss came in the form of subtle changes in Melody's behavior. Liam, ever attuned to his girlfriend's moods, noticed a new restlessness about her. She seemed distracted during their conversations, her mind clearly elsewhere. When he asked what was bothering her, Melody would brush off his concerns with a breezy laugh and a quick change of subject. Then came the unexplained absences. Melody, who had always been punctual to a fault, began showing up late to their dates. She offered vague explanations about work emergencies or traffic. But something about her stories didn't quite add up. Liam tried to quell the doubts creeping into his mind, chalking up his suspicions to his own insecurities. But as the weeks wore on, the inconsistencies became harder to ignore. There were hushed phone conversations that abruptly ended when Liam entered the room and mysterious text messages that Melody hurriedly deleted. Once, Liam caught a whiff of an unfamiliar cologne on Melody's scarf. A scent that stirred a distant memory he couldn't quite place. Liam's paranoia began to spiral. He found himself obsessively checking Melody's social media accounts, searching for clues. He would wake up in the middle of the night, his mind racing with scenarios of betrayal. The trust that had been the bedrock of their relationship was slowly eroding, replaced by a gnawing suspicion that threatened to consume him in a moment of weakness. Liam confided his fears to his father. Ezra, his face a mask of concern, advised his son to communicate openly with Melody. Perhaps there was a simple explanation for her behavior, he suggested. The irony of his deceitful words was lost on Liam. Liam, who had never been particularly good at lying, attempted to broach the subject with Melody. She, however, with the skill born of weeks of deception, deftly deflected his questions. She accused him of being overly possessive and reminded him of all she had sacrificed to be with him. Liam, racked with guilt, apologized profusely and vowed to be more trusting, but the seed of doubt had been planted and it continued to grow. Liam began to notice other oddities, how his father and Melody seemed to share inside jokes. He wasn't privy to the way their eyes would meet across the room during family gatherings, lingering a moment too long. Unable to shake his suspicions, Liam decided to take matters into his own hands. He began keeping a detailed log of Melody's comings and goings. He installed a tracking app on her phone under the guise of a security update. He even went so far as to hire a private investigator, a decision that filled him with equal parts shame and determination as Liam delved deeper into his investigation. He was unaware that he was unraveling a web of deceit that would lead him to a truth far more painful than he could have ever imagined. The stage was set for a confrontation that would alter the course of all their lives forever. The day of reckoning arrived on a sweltering August afternoon. Liam, acting on a tip from his private investigator, had called in sick to work and followed Melody as she left their apartment. His heart raced as he followed her car. Not to her office, as she had claimed, but to a secluded beachfront property on the outskirts of town. With a sinking feeling in his stomach, Liam realized he recognized the house. It was one of his father's many real estate investments, a place Ezra had often used for business retreats. As he watched Melody's car pull into the driveway, a familiar black Mercedes, his father's car, came into view, partially hidden behind a large oak tree. Liam's world tilted on its axis. He sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, grappling with the implications of what he was seeing. Part of him wanted to drive away, to pretend he had never witnessed this betrayal, but a stronger, more primal part urged him forward. With legs that felt like lead, Liam approached the house. The front door was unlocked. They hadn't expected any interruptions in their secluded haven. As he stepped into the cool interior, he heard their voices drifting from the upstairs bedroom. Soft laughter, intimate murmurs, the unmistakable sounds of passion. Each step up the stairs felt like a journey through quicksand. When he finally reached the bedroom door, Liam paused his hand on the doorknob. In that moment, he knew that opening the door would irrevocably change everything. Taking a deep breath, he turned the handle and stepped into the room. The scene that greeted Liam would be forever seared into his memory. His father and girlfriend, entangled in each other's arms, froze at his sudden appearance. Time seemed to stand still as the three of them stared at each other in horrified silence. It was Melody who moved first, scrambling to cover herself with the bedsheet, her face a mask of guilt and fear. Ezra, recovering quickly from the initial shock, stood up, his expression shifting from surprise to a strange mix of defiance and shame. "Liam, son," Ezra began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. But before he could continue, Liam's composure shattered. Years of pent-up resentment, insecurity, and now raw betrayal exploded in a primal roar of anguish and rage. Liam lunged forward, his fury directed at both his father and Melody, though his gaze remained fixed on Ezra. He lashed out verbally, questioning how his own father could betray him like this. Then, turning to Melody, his voice cracked with emotion as he expressed his feelings of love and betrayal. Melody, overcome with emotion, tried to reach out to Liam through her tears, pleading for a chance to explain, insisting that the situation wasn't what it appeared to be. However, Liam was too enraged to listen. In his anger, he knocked over a lamp, the sound of it shattering, punctuating the tense atmosphere. Liam's bitter laughter filled the room as he sarcastically questioned what else he was supposed to think upon discovering his girlfriend in bed with his father, Ezra, attempting to defuse the situation. Approached his son and asked him to discuss the matter calmly. He claimed they had never intended to cause harm, but this statement only served to intensify Liam's anger. Liam retorted sharply, demanding to know what outcome they had expected from their actions. As the confrontation escalated, the room became a battleground of raw emotions. Accusations flew, voices raised to a fever pitch. Consumed by his anger, Liam began to hurl objects across the room. A book, a vase, anything within reach. Ezra's patience finally snapped, and he shouted back at his son. He justified his actions by claiming that Melody made him feel truly alive in a way that neither Liam nor his mother ever had. This mention of Liam's deceased mother pushed him over the edge. Liam furiously defended his mother's memory, declaring that Ezra had never deserved either her or Melody. Caught in the crossfire, Melody desperately tried to calm both men down, but her pleas went unheard. The argument spiraled out of control, with father and son dredging up years of unresolved issues. They hurled accusations at each other, touching on favoritism, neglect, and feelings of inadequacy, all intertwined with the raw pain of the current betrayal in a moment of sudden clarity amidst the chaos. Liam realized he needed concrete evidence of this betrayal. He feared that without proof, Ezra's influence and Melody's manipulation would distort the truth, leaving him to be seen as nothing more than a jealous, irrational boyfriend. Liam's gaze fell upon his phone, which he had left on a nearby dresser when he entered the room. In that instant, he made a decision that would irrevocably change all of their lives. He announced his intention to expose both Ezra and Melody, vowing that everyone would learn the truth about their characters. As he reached for his phone, a look of panic flashed across Ezra's face. In that split second, the older man realized the implications of what his son was about to do. The scandal would ruin him, his reputation, his business, everything he had worked for decades to build. In a moment of blind panic and self-preservation, Ezra lunged forward. Ezra's demeanor suddenly shifted from anger to desperation. He cried out in despair, his voice hoarse and filled with fear. He vehemently protested against Liam's threat to expose their actions, clearly terrified of the potential consequences. The sudden change in Ezra's tone revealed just how much he stood to lose if the truth came to light, hinting at the far-reaching implications this revelation could have beyond their immediate family drama. Time seemed to slow down as Ezra's hands made contact with Liam's chest. It wasn't a forceful shove, more of a panicked attempt to stop his son from recording. But Liam, caught off guard by the sudden movement, stumbled backward. The bedroom opened onto a small balcony overlooking the beach, and the balcony door had been left open to let in the sea breeze, its sheer curtains billowing gently in the wind. As Liam stumbled, his lower back made contact with the balcony railing. For a heartbeat, Liam teetered on the edge, his arms flailing as he fought to regain his balance. Ezra and Melody watched in horror, frozen in place as Liam's center of gravity shifted just a fraction too far. With a look of surprise etched on his face, Liam fell backward over the railing. A strangled cry escaped his lips as he plummeted 3 stories down, his body making a sickening thud as it hit the concrete patio below. Melody's scream pierced the air, shattering the momentary silence that had followed Liam's fall. Ezra stood frozen, his face pale, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Snapping out of his trance, he rushed to the balcony, shoving Melody aside. The sight that greeted him below would haunt him for the rest of his days. Liam lay motionless on the patio, his body twisted at an unnatural angle and a pool of blood slowly spreading around his head. The scene had taken a drastic and tragic turn. Melody, in a state of panic, tried to call an ambulance, her hands trembling as she reached for her phone. However, Ezra, with a grim understanding of the situation, realized that it was too late. The way Liam had fallen and landed made it clear that death had been instantaneous. As the devastating reality of his only son's death began to sink in, a calculating part of Ezra's mind kicked into gear. He stopped Melody before she could make the call, grabbing her wrist with eerie calmness. He suggested that they needed to think carefully about their next steps. Melody, shocked and confused, questioned Ezra's behavior, insisting that they needed to get help. Ezra's voice, slightly cracked with emotion, explained that while it was already too late for Liam, calling for help now would only result in both of them going to prison. As they grappled with this moral dilemma, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the air, likely triggered by a neighbor who had heard Melody's scream. Ezra and Melody stood together on the balcony, the weight of their actions and the monumental decision they faced hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. The following hours passed in a whirlwind of flashing lights, relentless questions, and hastily concocted lies. When the police arrived, Ezra and Melody had composed themselves and agreed on a story. Liam had been drinking, they said, and had accidentally fallen off the balcony during a heated argument about his alcohol consumption. Ezra, drawing on his vast experience in business negotiations, narrated the fabricated tale with convincing anguish and regret. He spoke of Liam's supposed struggles with alcohol, weaving a narrative of a troubled son whom he had been desperately trying to help. Melody, still visibly shaken, corroborated his story between sobs. The responding officers, recognizing Ezra as a prominent local figure, treated him with deference. They took preliminary statements and cordoned off the area, assuring Ezra that they would conduct a thorough investigation, but that everything pointed to a tragic accident. When Liam's body was removed and the initial activity died down, Ezra and Melody retreated into the house. Weighed down by the enormity of what they had done, not only the affair, but now also the cover-up, they felt crushed by the weight of it all, like a physical force bearing down on them. "We need to get our story straight," Ezra said, his voice low and urgent. "Every detail has to match." Over the next few hours, As the shock gave way to a grim determination to avoid being caught, they meticulously rehearsed their narrative. They decided on exactly when Liam had arrived, what had been said during the supposed argument, and how he had stumbled over the balcony railing. Melody, her face pale and gaunt, questioned the morality of what they were doing. "Shouldn't we just tell the truth?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ezra looked at her with a steely gaze. "And then what?" he demanded. "We both go to prison and Liam stays dead. Is that what you want?" Intimidated by his intensity and her own fear of the consequences, Melody reluctantly agreed to stick to the story. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the scene of the tragedy, Ezra made a series of phone calls. He contacted his lawyer, setting in motion the machinery that would shield him from any legal repercussions. He called his PR team to prepare a statement that would paint Liam as a troubled soul and himself as a grieving father. Meanwhile, Melody busied herself erasing any trace of their affair. Stray pieces of clothing, a forgotten earring, lipstick on a wine glass. Everything was meticulously cleaned or disposed of. By the time the detectives returned for a more thorough round of questioning, Ezra and Melody were prepared. They gave their statements with the perfect mix of sorrow and confusion, playing the roles of the grieving father and the shocked girlfriend to perfection when the detectives left. Seemingly satisfied with their answers, Ezra and Melody exchanged a look. They had survived the initial storm, but both knew this was only the beginning. The true test would come in the days and weeks ahead as the investigation unfolded and their web of lies was put to the test. Detective Amelia Harding stared at the photos of the crime scene spread across her desk, frowning. Something about the Blackwood case didn't sit right with her. On the surface, it seemed like a straightforward accidental death, but years of experience had honed Harding's instincts, and those instincts were telling her there was more to this story. She began digging deeper into the case, meticulously reviewing witness statements and forensic reports. Soon, small inconsistencies began to emerge. The angle of Liam's fall didn't quite match the story of him drunkenly stumbling over the railing. The toxicology report showed only trace amounts of alcohol in his system, certainly not enough to significantly impair his balance. Then there were the neighbors' testimonies. Several reported hearing a man's angry shout shortly before Liam's fall, but none mentioned signs of drunken behavior. One neighbor even recalled hearing a woman scream just before the thud of Liam's body hitting the ground, a detail that didn't fit with the version of events given by Ezra and Melody. Harding's suspicions deepened as she delved into Liam's past. Friends and colleagues painted a picture of a man who, while not perfect, certainly didn't have a drinking problem. His work record showed no signs of alcohol abuse, contrary to what Ezra had claimed. As guilt and paranoia gnawed at them, Ezra and Melody began turning on each other. Small disagreements blossomed into bitter arguments, with each blaming the other for their current predicament. The trust that had once bound them in their secret affair was now rapidly eroding, replaced by suspicion and resentment. Melody, already teetering on the edge of a breakdown, was the first to crack under the pressure. Through tears and remorse, she confessed to the affair and the true circumstances of Liam's death. She spoke of the confrontation, the fight and the tragic accident that followed when Ezra learned of Melody's confession. He realized the game was up. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. In a moment of clarity, he saw the full weight of his actions, not only the accidental death of his son, but also the life of emotional neglect that had led them to this point. With a heavy heart and a strange sense of relief that the charade was over, Ezra also confessed. He corroborated Melody's account and took full responsibility for the push that had sent Liam over the balcony. The trial that followed was a media circus, exposing the sordid details of the affair and the fatal confrontation. Ezra, once a pillar of the community, was sentenced to 15 years for involuntary manslaughter and obstruction of justice. Melody received a lighter sentence of 5 years for her role in the cover-up, taking into account her cooperation with the investigation. In the end, the truth came out, but it brought no comfort to any of those involved. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Make sure to hit like and subscribe to our channel. What sentence would you have given? Leave me a comment and I'll read it. Enjoy life because you only get one. Yours truly, The Detective. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like this video for more true crime video. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Take care and see you in the next video.